Trade is top of mind for everybody right now, and in today's episode, we're going to talk all about market diversification for Canada's forest industry. I'm joined by Bruce St. John, the president of Canada Wood, and we're going to hear all about the decades of work that they've been doing to invest in export markets for Canada's forest products sector, some of the exciting opportunities outside of wood construction for forest products, and how some emerging markets are looking at Canada forest products as an opportunity to achieve their sustainability goals. I can't wait for you to join me for this episode. As always, I'm your host, Aspen. This is Forestry Talks, and let's get into it. Bruce, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, really excited to have you for the conversation today. Obviously, there's lots going on in the world of trade right now and lots of stuff that we're thinking about as part of the forest sector. And Canada Wood has a really interesting role to play there. Can you tell me a little bit about what is Canada Wood and what your mandate is?
Sure. Canada Wood, what we do is we promote forest products internationally. We're funded by Alberta, British Columbia, and some funding from the federal government, and of course the industry as well. So we have two offices located in China. We have an office located in Korea and an office located in Japan. We have a staff person that sits in the BC government office in Vietnam, and we have a staff member in the UK as well.
Yeah. So lots of market diversification work that's happening. We know, of course, and we've been hearing lots about this in the news, how big of a market US is to Canada, how important that market is to us. But it sounds like there's demand in other parts of the world. Could you maybe talk about, maybe let's start with the Canada-US market and what that looks like, and then we'll get into some of the other areas.
Sure. The Canada-US market, it's obviously the most accessible market for Canada, and over 80% of our lumber goes into the US market. So we've been very dependent on it. It's an easy market to get access to, and the U.S. is the largest consumer of forest products. So we've been pretty fortunate to be beside the United States and have access to that market. With that being said, we have the ongoing issues with duties, which have been going on for over 100 years. And now with the current situation with potential tariffs, there's obviously a high risk. But the Canadian industry has always had an offshore program. They've always been interested in it, and there's been a lot of benefits to it over the years.
Does Canada Wood play a role right now in trying to reduce or eliminate the 25% tariffs that are being threatened by US?
No, Canada Wood's just strictly focused on the offshore markets. We work collectively with the industry and with the government, ensuring that what we call our stakeholders, to make sure that we're delivering what they want to get delivered. So we'll have ongoing discussions with all the parties that are involved in funding us and making sure that we're meeting their expectations in terms of going offshore.
Yeah, and so with respect to the offshore markets, my understanding is that we've got some mature markets offshore and then also some perhaps developing or emerging markets that we're really excited to explore. So starting with maybe the mature markets, could you give us an overview of where those are and what our work has looked like to develop those over the years?
Yeah, so the most mature market that we've got is Japan. And we actually just celebrated the 50th anniversary of the work that's been going on in Japan. Japan's a good market because it's wood-based. It is the mature market, as you said. So they've have a history of using wood construction. Now, what they did in the past is what they call post and beam, which is sort of 4x4 timbers. And they were notched and grooved, and that was their building system. And it still is to this day. It's the largest part of their business. But we introduced 2x4 housing 50 years ago, and they accepted our building codes. They accepted our strength properties and all the benefits of 2x4 construction, which is what we use, the traditional construction that we use in North America. In the time since we introduced that, we've built over 3 million houses in Japan using the 2x4 system. So it's become one that's been well accepted. It's changing today. The demographics in Japan, I've always said that the Japan demographics are a perfect bell curve, in that you can see the rise in the population and you can see the forecasted decrease in population. So what we call single family housing, which is your traditional house in your neighborhood, is changing, and the demand for that is shrinking. So we pivoted our business away from single family to multifamily and to non-residential construction. So we've introduced the mid-rise building system using 2x4. And so that's sort of 4 to 6 stories. We've 150 have been built. We've had some really exciting code development that's occurred in terms of making it more accessible, because the Japanese market is very focused on fire safety. The other thing is the strength properties and the shear wall systems that we've introduced, which helps on terms of seismic activity, because Japan's very, very prone to earthquakes. So 2x4 housing is very good in terms of, it's got very good seismic properties. So we've been able to develop, we're working to develop that over into the mid-rise system as well. And we see a lot of potential there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so, Bruce, of course, I had the pleasure of joining you, and of course, a larger contingent from Alberta and some from BC as well to join or in the celebration of that anniversary in November in Japan. And of course, there was a broader mission attached to that where we got to learn lots about what demand looked like for Canadian wood products in Japan and where might some opportunities be for continued development. So certainly lots in the low to mid-rise, non-residential construction was really exciting. But we also got to see a really interesting demonstration project. And maybe, Bruce, you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. That was the Tokyo University of the Arts. And so there's been a real push in all markets, whether it's North America or the offshore markets, to go to cross-laminated timber, which is known as CLT. For us, having the access to the Japanese market, I'm not going to go into all the details, but there's some barriers eliminating us from being able to go into the market. So what we did was we introduced what is called nail laminated timber, or NLT. And essentially it's 2x4s or 2x6s stand on their edge, and then you nail them together, and you can build a panel much the same as you would CLT. So we had an opportunity with the Tokyo University of the Arts, with the designer of it, to introduce NLT into that building. And so from the second to the fourth story of the building, they used NLT using Alberta wood, and the project was funded by the Alberta government as well to introduce NLT into the Japanese market. And so it's the one that we use in terms of profile project to show the possibilities. And the fact that it's a university and it's used in a situation where noise properties are very important, it showed the value of the project. And so we've been really happy with the return that we've been able to get, and we do a lot of promotion on it. We have videos on our website and case studies of the use of it.
And, that's so great to hear, Bruce, and something I'd love to dig into a little bit more is I think we get to do these types of trade missions where we're talking about, the sustainability of our industry, providing information about the front end, part of operations, and then talking about opportunities to expand the use of wood in those other markets. And so it's always great to hear about how we're finding success and how we're measuring success for trade missions like that, for demo projects like that. So when you look at, for example, that trade mission that we just went on, how are you looking at measuring success, and how do you know it was, we did what we needed to do?
Yeah, so I think it's sort of twofold. One part is, or maybe even threefold, is that, first of all, we wanted to let the Japanese industry know the presence of Alberta on Japan. And I think part of the problem is historically, while Alberta, 30% of the shipments offshore come from Alberta, the markets never realized that. And we thought it was really important that people had Alberta front and center. When you talk about uncertainty of supply coming out of Canada, because some of the issues we face in terms of fires or beetle kill and things like that, we wanted the market to understand that Alberta is a very important player in the offshore markets, and that they're there to deliver, even if there's some issues occurring in BC or whatever, and it's the importance of having Alberta. So that was one part of it. The other part of it, of course, was so that the government of Alberta, the industry of Alberta, saw firsthand where the wood was going, where the value of it was, meet the players, understand the market. And so we thought that was fairly well achieved. The feedback we got, it was good. And then overall was showing that project as an example and saying, here's the opportunities going forward. Here's where we'd like you to participate in the future. And to be honest with you, I had some conversations with the Alberta government earlier this week, and we were talking about the opportunities for some funding for some other projects. And so we're going to be going back next week to see have discussions with them in terms of what are the opportunities for on a go forward basis, and see where we can continue the momentum that we started and build upon that.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. And I mean, even just recently, Bruce, we had some friends that I think we'd met actually on the mission to Japan who came out to Alberta to meet with the industry and to meet with the government here.
And for them, that was specifically, they wanted to reassure the Alberta government that they saw the Alberta government as being important, the contribution that Alberta was making. And, with Alberta as well, the important thing to remember is that Oriented Strand Board, or OSB, which is critical in terms of 2x4 construction. I'd say Alberta most probably ships around 95% of the offshore volumes that go to China, Japan, Korea, or the other markets. And it's critical in terms of 2x4 construction. And so while we talk about lumber, OSB is a huge component of what we do. And Alberta is the biggest player in terms of what we do on the OSB front.
Yeah. Awesome. And I want to come back to a point that you mentioned earlier, Bruce, about seismic resilience, because I think, it's really relevant to the theme of the conversations we're having on the podcast this year, which is Alberta forest products as solutions. And so talk to me a little bit about how forest products can be a solution to building for seismic resilience.
Sure. So I'll give you an example. There was an earthquake in Osaka, and I'm going to say it's called the Kansai or the Osaka. Kansai earthquake, and I'd say it's close to 20 years ago. And it was devastating to the Osaka region. And one of the things they found was the traditional post and beam houses, which I talked about earlier. A lot of them fell down. And in one area specifically, there was a 2x4 house in the middle of this group of houses. All the houses around them fell down, and this one 2x4 house stayed up while the other ones fell down. And it was really it was a good message to send, but when you look at culturally from Japan, you can't really promote things like that because it's just the way the culture works. But what we did come away from that, we knew there were seismic properties with 2x4 construction versus the traditional post and beam, and so we did more technology work on it. We did testing with universities, with the Japan 2x4 Association. And so we've done a lot of work to show the seismic properties of 2x4 construction versus other building methodologies. And we just actually got some results back 2 weeks ago. And it was a project, again, funded by Alberta. And what they have is, it's called a mid-ply wall system. And what it is, and I don't want to get too technical with you, but it was developed by FP Innovations, Forest Products Innovations Laboratory in Vancouver, and we exported it to Japan around 20 years ago. And we've followed up with some additional testing, and the testing that came out going into what we talked about earlier, the mid-rise construction, this wall system that was tested performed higher than's ever been tested in Japan testing, regardless if it's concrete, steel, or any other wall methodology. And the important thing about it was the seismic factors of it. And this wall system that's been developed or being tested currently, we've got some more work to do on it. It'll allow us to expand mid-rise construction. And, we thank Alberta for the contribution they had in terms of making it possible to do the design work and the testing that we did for it.
Yeah, it's really exciting to hear about the exploration that's happening in this space, the results that we're seeing. Just to maybe come to it in a little bit of simpler terms, the properties that are enabling forest products and wood products to perform better in a seismic scenario, is it the flexibility of the material? Like
that's exactly what it is, Aspen. So a house will move. It allows the house to move and to shake. And so what they'll do is they'll build a house and put it on what they call a shake table. And basically it moves around and simulates an earthquake. And you watch the house shake back and forth, but it doesn't break. It allows the movement to occur. and the house will stand. Something like concrete, on the other hand, if it
Mm-hmm.
moves, it cracks. And you
Right.
basically have to tear the whole thing down. But with
Yeah.
wood construction, especially the 2x4 system, by its ability to move, when the earthquake's over, it's still standing. And there may be some
Mm-hmm.
work you have to do, fix a wall here or there or something, but the entire structure generally stands in place.
Yeah. I always love these case studies that we're doing with different wood building materials because I find they're almost hilariously anticlimactic. And that's kind of the point. Like, I think on a previous show, I was talking about some testing that was done with mass timber products and they were trying to light it on fire. And, unsurprisingly, it didn't go up in flames because it's like taking a lighter to a log. It doesn't go up like that. And so same idea with the shake table. You're shaking the building and it stays up.
Well, and that's, what you brought up there, that incidence in terms of the fire testing. To give you an example, some of the issues we face in Japan, when you go into 6 stories, they have what they call a 2-hour burn test. So you have to have that building cannot have anything burn in it for 2 hours. But what
Mm-hmm.
that means is when you build a building, the gyprock that you have on the side of your wall, in Japan, you have to have 3 layers of it when you go up 6 stories. And so
Mm-hmm.
you could have 30% of the weight of the building is just gyprock going on the
Mm-hmm.
walls. And one of the things that we recently just did was a fire test using a new wall system. And we said that we could use 2 layers of gyprock. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
going to be implemented, and the government's accepted that. And so that's going to reduce the cost of the construction and make it easier to
Yeah.
do the construction as well. So there's a lot, there's a lot of technical work. And then we get
Yeah,
to do the fun stuff, which is promote it.
absolutely. And, something else that I observed while we were on that mission in Japan, I was certainly hearing lots that in Japan, they were trying to build more with wood because of, values of sustainability, really prioritizing that value in the built environment. Also just embracing the natural beauty of forest products. And so, Bruce, maybe you could talk about some of those pieces.
Sure. So in Japan, the regulations that they put in place is that they will be net zero by 2050. So
Mm-hmm.
that means they've got to have zero carbon emissions by 2050. And they've identified that wood construction, because wood holds in the carbon,
Mm-hmm.
it's the best alternative for construction. So they're really trying to push through more wood construction where possible. At the same time, they're trying to push through their own species. But that's the priority for them, is to try to
Mm-hmm.
grow some of it and show that you're going towards green building solutions.
Yeah, and then the beauty of the wood as well, like really embracing that idea of biophilic design, which maybe not everybody knows that term. So if you
Yeah,
could maybe
sure.
explain that a little bit.
So biophilia, it's basically everyone, when you go into a building, you will
Mm-hmm.
see that you naturally have this tendency to feel warmth and comfort as you go into an exposed wood building. There's
Mm-hmm.
studies that have been done where they show in hospital environments, patients recover better, they feel better as they go through the recovery process.
Mm-hmm.
In schools, children are less agitated and they study better
Yeah.
in an environment that has good biophilia. So exposed wood showing that, and it gives them a level of comfort. So there
Mm-hmm.
is everyone sort of thought it was anecdotal sort of responses to exposed wood, but now they're actually doing studies to show that it actually does benefit human beings.
Yeah. I mean, anecdotally, I completely agree with that. I certainly feel better when I'm in an environment. This table's wood, right? Like I come in here and you just have that innate response to it. We'll move on, of course, to some of the other markets shortly here, Bruce. But just before we close on Japan, I know something also that's really unique about it is they, in particular, have a demand for some of our highest quality products. And that might be unique from some other markets. So maybe if you could talk a little bit about what's driving that and how that's different from other markets.
So there's a couple of on that front. There's a couple of things. First of all, Japan pays for quality. They always like the highest quality products. So, for instance, if you're building a 2x4 house in North America and the wood's going into the house, you can see defects on it, but the contractor or builder would say, hey, it meets all the expectations in terms of the strength properties and everything that you need.
Yeah.
Don't worry how it looks, it's fine. The Japanese don't feel that way. The Japanese want it to look beautiful and perfect. Even if it's getting covered up behind a piece of gyprock, They want it to look good. And a lot of people in the past, especially when they were building the house, the contractor would be building it and the families would come through during the construction process and they'd see a piece of wood and say, oh no, I don't like that piece of wood in my house. And so the builder would have to tear it out and replace it. And so there's a lot of cost to that, and they didn't want to go through that. So that's part of it in terms of they'll pay more, but they want it to look really good. And that's one of the attractions with the Japanese market is that it is a high value market, and they pay for quality.
Yeah.
There's other things that they like. For instance, in the temples, they use historically they've used a species called hinoki. And it's a Japanese species, but it's got very, very similar to yellow cedar, which comes out of British Columbia. And so the largest market for yellow cedar globally is to Japan, because Japan, again, they like the quality, they like the story behind it, and it's very similar to their own species. So they pay a huge premium for yellow cedar over any other alternatives, just because it makes them feel more at home with what they're building with.
Yeah, well, certainly a really important market for us to continue to invest in. I think we're obviously seeing some really positive results from the work that your team is doing, from some of the different demo projects, and of course with support from the government of Alberta here. Coming back to some of the other mature markets, Bruce, that you're working with, if I'm not mistaken, China and South Korea.
Yeah, so China's not really a mature market. We've been in China for close to 20 years. To give you an idea, when we started doing the work in China, there was no building codes for wood construction. So we started from the basic floor of nothing. Even though there's buildings in China, they have temples or in Beijing, the wooden city in Beijing that everyone knew from the famous The Last Emperor, the Forbidden City. It's made out of wood. So we started from scratch, and so we had to go work with the government and get ingrained within the government committees and push through to get them to start building through with wood. No one knew how to build. Take a hammer and put together a house. So we had a college that we set up, and that grew to 5 colleges. And so there's 5 colleges that we set up to do to teach wood construction. At the same time, then you went to the university level, and none of the professors in construction or engineering or architecture knew anything about wood. So then we had to get university people coming through these universities, from people that spoke Chinese from North America. We put them into the universities and taught the professors. And then we had the professors coming over to North America, and we taught them about wood construction. And then we had their students came in as well. And every summer we had a group of around 20 university students from China come to Vancouver, and we put them through a course program at UBC. And then we get them to take an opportunity to construct with wood or put a project together that would be built out of wood. So we've been doing this over 20 years, and now we've developed all that knowledge within the universities. And we've got, I'm going to say, 7 universities now that are teaching wood construction in China. At the same time, we've got the schools that have developed the people to construct with wood. So we've got this community out there now in China that understands how to build with wood.
That's incredible.
It was a lot of work. I mean, we had a lot of staff. We've downsized a lot in China, but part of that has been because we were successful and we meet our goals, as opposed to saying, okay, we met our goal. What are we going to do with the money now? It's more, we met our goal. Okay, let's pull back. And so we've continued to pull back in China because we've been fortunate in that we've been able to build somewhat of a wood culture there.
Yeah.
Still a long way to go. I'll give you an example. So glue laminated timber, which is timber sort of stacked on top of each other and glued together to make large beams. People started using that in China, but they didn't really know what they were doing. It was starting to fall apart. People would make basically a box out of wood, stuff it full of hay, and say it's a full beam. But then the building failed. So we said we've got to deal with this now.
Yeah.
So what we did was we worked with the Chinese government and we put in a certification scheme that we've been working through, and we've got 7 of the laminators in China that are signed up. And what it says is, it's a quality assurance. If you buy
Mhm.
from these people, you know they're going to have the quality that's required, and therefore, when you construct a building using glulam timber, then you'll know, and you buy from these people, you know that you're not going to be at any risk on a go-forward basis.
Mhm.
We've still got a long way to go in China, but I'll give you an example. So, for instance, in China in 2060, they said they're going to go to net zero, and 40% of the carbon emissions in China come from construction. So
Hmm.
it's a huge opportunity to
Yeah.
grow wood construction, because wood construction is the most carbon-friendly building solution.
Mhm.
And I was recently in China in November after the Alberta mission, and we met with the 2 largest design institutes in China, and we signed memorandum of understanding with them. So one of them, to give you an example,
Yeah.
they built the international airport in Shanghai. They built 10 of the 11 largest buildings in Shanghai. Another one built the National Museum in Beijing, built the Bird's Nest Stadium that was at the Olympics, of the Beijing Olympics. So they're the largest designers, constructors in China.
Hmm.
And they've said to us, we want to sign MOUs with you because we want you to help us grow wood construction in China. So to
Yeah.
have them come forward, as opposed to the sort of the smaller scale people that we had in the past, it's a
Mhm.
big step. And so it shows that China's taking wood construction really seriously.
Yeah, huge. I mean, and what a great testament to the work that Canada Wood has been doing to develop that market over the last 20 plus years. Certainly not a one size fits all approach with all the various markets that you're working with.
But to put it in perspective with China, if we can get China on board in terms of wood construction, China constructs 6.5 million housing starts a year.
Wow.
And to
Yeah.
put that in comparison, in Canada, it's 250,000. So it's a huge increase. And Japan, as an example, they'll do 850,000 starts. So
Mhm.
China's a huge opportunity for us if we can convert over to wood construction.
Yeah. What does local supply look like in some of those offshore markets compared to what they have to import?
Yeah, in Japan, they've got a strong domestic market. They're trying to go to 50% self-sufficiency with their own domestic species.
Hmm.
Um, in China, they have to import wood, but what they're trying to do now is shift into bamboo where possible. And when you and I think of, or at least me, I think of bamboo, I think of something that's around an inch wide that's in my backyard.
Yeah.
But in China, it can be up to 8, 9 inches wide. It's huge, and
Okay.
it's easily growable. So what they do is they take it, they crush it, and they're looking at making products like OSB or beams and so
Hmm.
on. However, using bamboo in an engineered wood format, it needs a lot of glue. So
Mm.
if you're to take a piece of oriented strand board, OSB as an example,
Yeah.
if you got an equivalent from a weight perspective, if you use bamboo OSB versus a 1 by 1 piece of OSB made out of bamboo would be the
Hmm.
same weight as a piece of 4 by 8 OSB. So it's
Right.
very, very heavy. There's an
Yeah.
opportunity for us to collaborate together, take the benefits of both, and be able to build with both. And I think that's what we have to do, is hybrid construction using wood and bamboo on a go forward basis. They've got a long way to go on the bamboo side, though. They want to develop it, but it's a long way away.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I'm actually really looking forward to learning more about how that evolves. Of course, so we've talked a little bit about some of the mature markets, but there are some emerging ones that Canada Wood is looking to develop. So, how do you identify what could potentially be an emerging market for Canada Wood, and what type of opportunities do they see our wood products being solutions for some of their local challenges?
Yeah, so what we do is, first of all, you look at the economics of the country, you look at the population base, you look at their building history, you
Hmm.
look at things like weather in terms of if you're building out of wood, how does it work in a humid climate? How does it work in a heavy rain climate? What about termites?
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of things that you take into account. And one of the most important things is GDP or average family income, because if wood construction can't be done cheaply, you just really can't do it because just because of the inputs and the building systems. A lot of, but with that being said, if you go into some of these smaller countries, they'll build with mud or they'll build very, shacks and things like that.
Yeah.
And so you're not going to convert them over to a wood house.
Mm-hmm.
But then you look at if there's countries using other species and you say, okay, well, where's an opportunity for Canadian species to be transferred into those markets? So for instance, in India, we did a lot of work on for furniture applications, whether it was internal pieces on a bed, so bed frame, or it could go into an exposed table. It could go into fittings and so on. So a lot of work's been done in India. They've done quite a few demonstration projects up in the Himalayas using Douglas fir and SPF lumber, being into lodges and vacation resorts.
Yeah.
And now there's been a lot of work started in Vietnam, especially on the furniture sector, because while China's the largest producer of furniture in the world today, Vietnam's coming on strong, and Vietnam will surpass China on furniture. So we've been doing a lot working with the provincial government who have the office there, and working to develop markets for Canadian species in Vietnam to be used in furniture applications.
That is really interesting, Bruce. I guess incorrectly made the assumption that your work was all about focusing on increasing demand for wood in the built environment, but there's actually other avenues where you're looking to increase the use of wood. Yeah.
No, for sure. We've done quite a bit of work in China, especially around the furniture sector until it shifted away to go to Vietnam.
So I'm much less familiar with that space. What are some applications that Canadian wood is being used in furniture, and why might some countries want to choose Canadian wood over other local species?
So unfortunately, a lot of it comes down to price when it comes to using Canadian species versus other species.
Yeah.
But then when you go into some applications, for instance, using hemlock, which is from the coast of BC, it takes stain very well. And so you can take hemlock and you can stain it and you can make it look like any other species. It's got very strong screw holding properties. So when you are putting the furniture together and you're using screws and so on, hemlock's very, very strong that way, stronger than a lot of other species. So what you try to do is you try to find the attributes of the species, and then you turn around and then you find the specific end use, and you say, okay, well, with hemlock as an example, here's the attributes hemlock has, and in this application, such as bedroom furniture, kitchen tables, chairs, then you can apply hemlock into those end uses. On the SPS side, a lot of it's used for things like couch frame. So you'll have a finished couch, and then you need to have the structure within. And that goes with OSB as well. There was a large OSB company, a large furniture manufacturer in Vietnam, and they were buying huge volumes of OSB to be used in furniture applications on the internal frame for a couch or a bed or something like that.
That is fascinating. Don't know how I never imagined that was also a part of the mandate of Canada Wood. That's really interesting.
Yeah, no, it is. It's important. You have to look at all the opportunities that exist. I mean, our role is to promote forest products for Canada.
Yeah.
So we need to look at everything, all the opportunities that are out there. You can't turn around and just focus on housing, because there could be something else that's there that we can turn around. And diversification, obviously, and especially in today's climate, is important. And diversification doesn't just stop at housing. It continues to go through the entire supply chain.
So, Bruce, I know that right now, of course, we're in the middle of a grant from the Alberta government to continue to advance the use of wood in other markets. And so maybe just before we close, if you could tell me a little bit about what's next for that grant, or what do you see as a big part of your work in 2025?
Yeah, so we're talking about with the government right now about extending the grant. We have we did have the demonstration project in Japan. There's a lot of other programs that we have associated with the grant money. A lot of technical work that we're doing in all the markets, in Korea, in China, Japan. We're doing promotional work in terms of, for instance, we have a brochure that's specific to Alberta forest products that we have in China that shows the end use applications for Alberta forest products and promotes the industry as well. And then on a go-forward basis, we're looking at more demonstration projects using NLT in Japan, potentially in China as well. We've got a lot of work that we can do. We just want to make sure that we get the highest possible return on investment with the dollars that we do get. So we target it very carefully to the country and the end use to make sure that we can get the biggest traction as an outcome of the work, the investment that we make.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Bruce, this has been amazing. I mean, trade and diversifying export markets has never been more important or more topical than right now. Although, of course, this is something that clearly Canada Wood has been investing in and building on for a long time. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I'd just like to say it's a pleasure to be on the show. Very grateful for the support that we're getting from Alberta. And we think that we'll get very good returns on the work that we're going to do on a go-forward basis. And we're really happy to be working with Alberta. They're fantastic partners in what we do.
Yeah. And we look forward to continuing to work together.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode of Forestry Talks, make sure that you check out all of the other great episodes that we've done on the show. We've had on fantastic leaders all across Canada's forest industry. We're talking about sustainability, partnerships, you name it, we've got it. We'd really love for you to follow along with all the other episodes that we've done. So don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and you can always check out our social media at Alberta Forests or www.albertaforestproducts.ca to learn even more about all things forestry in Alberta. As always, I'm your host, Aspen Dudzic, and I'll see you next time.
This series is proudly produced by the team at Road 55. Road 55 creates content that connects. For more information, visit our website at road55.ca.